So we're all incensed. Oh, you want me to stop?
Yeah, 1 second. Can everyone just turn their microphone? Whoever's switching up the.
You can use
I can mute it.
Yeah.
No. That's fine. If everyone else can mute their.
Okay.
Okay.
And if anyone has a question, so you can just turn on your mic and just ask. And it doesn't have to be that I'm just talking the entire time. Okay, Will, we're ready? Okay, great. Okay, so we're all generally incensed by the lies that we see about Israel. Generally, we run into them for the most part online. We see whether it be on social media or in headlines. We see kind of like these distorted headlines about Israel and these narratives about Israel that infuriate us. Whether it's it talks about how Gaza is a closed-off area that Israel stops supplies from coming in, when we know that there's like tons of supplies that Israel itself sends in every single day to Gaza. Whether it's that there's abuse at checkpoints, when we know that if anybody spent 15 minutes at a checkpoint, they'd see that there's absolutely no abuse at any Israeli checkpoints. To where they talk about mass discriminations in policy against Israeli Arabs, which we know not to be true, that Israeli Arabs have equal rights. The idea that Israel as a Jewish state is a racist state. So we know that that's not true. To demonizing the whole idea of Zionism, that Jews should have a state. So all these things get us furious, and you see them online, and you immediately want to defend Israel. You want to step in and defend Israel. And we know that most of these lies, most of the narrative that's told about Israel by the rest of the world are fabricated. Right? We know that they're just straight out lies. And what we want to do is whenever, and this is our instincts, is whenever we see one of these lies, so especially when it comes to social media, is to immediately answer it. Right? Like, nope, that's wrong, and you're wrong, and I'll tell you why you're wrong, and I'll present you 3 reasons why you're wrong. And generally, for those of you that have been involved in doing this, especially when it comes to online and even in personal conversations, I'm assuming that you're more frustrated at the end of the conversation than the beginning of the conversation. So our frustration starts when we see the lie, and then seems to grow when nobody will look at the facts and believe you that you're telling the truth. So your frustration just grows. It doesn't actually stop. It doesn't end. And we're smart enough to know, by the fact that we know anything about Israel means that we're already smart enough, because we've already thought through the issues, that we're not going to really convince anybody. That's not going to happen. And yet we still fall for the same trap every time, right? There's probably nobody that's listening or watching this that's ever actually won a social media debate in their life, right? To the point where they've convinced anybody else. Like, it hasn't happened. It doesn't happen. And it's not known to happen. And yet we know that, and we still get engaged in it all the time, right? We do it all the time, and it's a complete and total waste of all of our time. It doesn't help anything. So we do it, So that's but we do it. We do it all the time, and it gets us nowhere. And the reason why we do it, we would like to say it's to address our frustrations, but that's not really why we do it. We have like this fantasy in our minds that there's either some sort of like grand debate competition or court case in the universe, and if we just score enough points and get enough things right, then we'll win that debate, right? Like, we're all sitting in the Oxford Debate Society, and it just happens to be taking place on our Facebook or Twitter pages. And sooner or later, a judge will come up and declare me the victor. But that's never, ever happened. And there's never a time where there's ever going to be a court case. We're just going to lose. So because we're going to lose all of these cases and every single attempt at defending Israel, it really, you really have to ask yourself, maybe we should take a different strategy. Maybe there's there's a more effective approach that we should be taking than addressing every single Israel critic that we run into, both in person and online, or writing letters to the editors of newspapers that will probably never be published, and if they are, they're never read by anybody, including the editor who's publishing them is just making sure you're not using any bad language, and then we'll publish it in a newspaper, but it's not convincing anybody, right? So in that case, the question is really, why defend Israel at all, right? Why do that at all if it's not going to win? And in fact, if you think about it, when somebody would ask you, well, why are you spending so much time defending Israel? Your answer will be, well, because I feel it's right to advocate for Israel, right? But advocating is not defense. So you're not even using the right terminology to describe your own actions, right? You're actually using a different word and a different action, and then when you are involved in your advocacy, you're not even advocating, you're just defending. And if somebody would say to you, well, why are you doing this? And you'll say, well, I have to defend Israel. Okay, so then why aren't you saying that you should be in Israel defense, right? But there's only one body doing Israel defense, and that's the Israeli Defense Forces, right? And that's the only people, and that's not defense online. That's real defense, and that's really the only place we should have defense. So a lot of the problem is that when we advocate for Israel, we're really doing it from an idealistic place. And we're trying to accomplish something idealistically. And generally, we are idealistic people, and that's a very good thing. But Israel doesn't need, and the Jewish people don't need idealists. What we need are pragmatic people that want to accomplish something and want to achieve something and move the ball down the field. That's really what we need, right? We don't need people to be idealists. Then there's the other problem, which is that many of the times, if we're really honest with ourselves, and we really look in the mirror when we're doing this stuff, and this is going to hurt a little, and it took me a long time to figure out what I was doing and why I was doing it, but we're really doing it to make ourselves feel better. We're not really doing it to help Israel, right? When somebody attacks Israel, if I stand for Israel, I really see it as an attack on me. So this is what I believe in, and you're attacking what I believe in. It's really an attack on me. And when I defend now, I'm not defending Israel as much as I'm defending myself, which makes sense why we don't care if we win, because I don't really have to convince the other person. I just have to make myself feel better. So if I spend like an hour online, arguing with everybody, at the end of the day, I feel good because I defended myself, right? But that's obviously pointless because you've done nothing, right? You've just made yourself feel better. And there's like 100 better things that you could be doing with your time to give yourself a more positive feeling than arguing with people who have no effect on the world online, right? They're just as ineffective in their criticism of Israel as you are in your defense of Israel. So you're really just completely, and then you ask yourself this. Let's look at the people who are the real experts at advocating Israel. The organizations that are being paid millions of dollars to do this, right? And what are they doing? And you see, they focus on what we would consider the dumbest things in the world. Cherry tomatoes and drip irrigation. And you want to scream at them and be like, no, well, what are you doing? No one cares about that. They're criticizing us because we don't have a right to the land of Israel. They're saying we're illegitimate. What are you talking about cherry tomatoes? That we have to get into the nitty-gritty of international law and show how Judea and Samaria is really, according to international, doesn't violate international law. It's completely consistent. We have every right to every inch of this land. And the Palestinian people aren't even real people, right? So we shouldn't even be talking to them. And they don't like peace. That's what we have to be establishing. Those are the facts on the ground. You talk about like the high-tech world and you talk about Israel, and you talk about how we've shown how farms can grow in the desert. And who cares? That's not important. Nobody's getting up there and accusing Israel of, hey, you're not growing anything in the desert. You're wasting your desert. Oh, no, I'll show you. I have drip irrigation. I'm growing stuff in the desert. You're wrong. We know how to make a cherry tomato in the desert and give it just enough water to make sure it grows plump. And then we win the debate. So it doesn't make any sense. We look at the organizations and we're like, they're failing. Why is anyone giving them money? It doesn't make any sense. I could do this 100 times better than they can. I'll address the true issues. This is what I have to do. This is what I'm called to do, right? But here's the problem. No one wants to hear logical points. Nobody, right? Have you ever seen like an ad for anything where they've sold you on the logic of eating their product? No, it tastes good. That's it. No one has the logic. No one shows why it makes sense for you to use their product. They're going to show you how it makes you feel better if you use their product. But nobody's going to talk about the logic behind their product because no one listens to logic. Now, we don't want to know that, right? No one wants to actually face that, especially when we're blessed with the facts on our side. That's our greatest tool. Our greatest tool is that we have the facts on our side. So we want to use our greatest thing that we have. That's the best part of being pro-Israel, right? I do a lot of political work with members of Congress. And it's the greatest thing is that you can go into a member of Congress and you don't have to lie. Everybody always asks this, the Palestinians have and the Arabs have much more money than we do. How come they can't establish an AIPAC type organization that convinces Congress to be anti-Israel? If it's all about the Benjamins, then why are they failing? Right? They've got a lot more than we do. So they should be winning this battle because it's really hard to sell something that is so obviously wrong. So when you go into a member of Congress's office and you're like, no, listen, you got to understand the terrorism part is the good part of our argument. That's what you should be supporting. We need money for more rockets to fire at Israel, right? So that's a losing argument. That's very hard to win, which is why they don't have an effective lobbying. But we have that effective lobbying, and that's what we should be pushing. But instead, we push cherry tomatoes and drip irrigation, and it like drives you crazy, right? If you would go on any of these congressional tours of Israel, you would want to bang your head against the wall with what they do here, right? Because they take them, they're like, look, here's our Iron Dome battery, and look at the pretty girl that's manning the Iron Dome battery. And you're like, what the heck? Who cares what she looks like? And all the members of Congress, let's get a picture. Let's get a picture in front of Iron Dome, right? And you're just like, why are they wasting the members of Congress? And yet we have like a 90% support in Congress, right? So why is that? Why is it? Why do 70% of Americans support a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, and we're not even addressing the issues? Bryce, did you have a question? You have to turn your mic on. No, you don't have a question. Okay, great. You're just waving. Okay, good to see you too. Okay, so that's the right. So these things boggle the mind as to why everyone is getting everything wrong on Israel advocacy, and we're the only people that know what should happen, and no one's giving us any money to do it, and we don't have a platform to do it, and people should be paying us so much money to get out the facts to the world. People would like us so much better, and they would like our argument so much better if only they would listen to us, right? If only they would listen to us, then we'd win this argument. There'd be no people that didn't like Israel because we have the facts on our side. So the simple answer is that no, we don't know better than everybody else, and actually other people in the world do know much better than we do, which is why smart people that have made a lot of money invest in them and not in social media warriors who have won no battles before in their entire lives. Okay, and that's because people want to hear what Israel does to benefit the world. That's what they want to know about. They care more about how Israel's productive than why Israel has a right to exist. In their minds, what gives Israel a right to exist is how Israel benefits the world, which isn't a crazy equation if we think about it, right? To take it to the extreme, nobody really does anything about China. China's a horrible place. They're like really bad people, right? Not the Chinese people themselves, but their leadership. They're like really evil. They will go down in the record books in history as some of the most evil people that have ever lived, right? It's just, they're horrible, horrible, horrible policies and horrible people. They have people in concentration camps, and the world doesn't, they don't even talk about it. No, everyone knows it's there. It's not like it's a secret. They've got 1 million Muslims in a concentration camp who are being re-educated. These aren't like fun remote learning classes. These are, right? This is like forced labor learning in a concentration camp, and they've taken 1 million people there. And the only reason why we don't care is because they make iPhones. And we're like, look, if I stop their forced labor practice of 8-year-olds, my iPhone's going to like double in price. It's really expensive already, right? So that's the only thing the world cares about is, what are you doing for us? So thankfully, Israel doesn't have forced labor camps, and we don't have concentration camps, and we don't abuse anybody. But the same lesson is true. The world wants to know what we're doing for the world. They don't want to know why we have a right to exist. They don't care if we have a right to exist. And they're not thinking for a second of their lives if Israel has a right to exist. They simply don't care. Israel exists. I don't know. It exists. What do I care? Most of the world thinks that Palestine exists, and it doesn't even exist, right? So the world just doesn't care. They just want to know, what does Israel contribute to me? How does it make my life better? And the answer to that question on a superficial level is, don't you like cherry tomatoes? And for somebody that really thinks, then it's like, hey, drip irrigation is going to save the world. It already has. And everyone's like, wow, that's really thoughtful. Israel has a right to exist, because if it didn't exist, I wouldn't have cherry tomatoes, right?
We should start iPhones.
What?
We should start iPhones.
We don't need to make iPhones. We've got cherry tomatoes. They're a lot. They cost a lot less, and they taste a lot better, right? So that's the now. Here's the thing. We have one play, and the anti-Israel people have their own play. Our play, right? Let's start their play. Their play starts off as victimhood. They're victims. That's their play, right? They're the victims. Israel's the oppressor. Same. Anything that they talk about is going to come down to that same narrative. That they're not going to change their tune. They haven't changed their tune in 100 years. That's always going to be how they're going to play. They're always going to be the victims, okay? Now, there's no emotional argument that we could make in response to somebody claiming victimhood that's going to overcome their emotional argument, and nobody wants to listen to facts. So you're not going to be able to quiet their charge of victimhood, because the only effective way you have to change their notion of victimhood, their narrative of victimhood, is to actually give facts, and no one's going to listen to you give facts. And you can't really be as successful as we are and also claim to be victims with anybody believing you, right? We are not victims. We are anything but victims. We are like one of the most powerful countries in the world. We have one of the most powerful armed forces in the world. Our economy till about 2 weeks ago was one of the strongest in the world. It might still be one of the strongest in the world, because if like you have who knows how you measure things anymore. But we have an effective marketplace where we're the second greatest high-tech place in the world, right? So to come out and be like, no, we're the victims, like that's not going to play. So you can't use emotion and you can't use facts. So therefore, what you have to do is completely ignore their notion of victimhood, because there's absolutely no way of getting that effectively across. No one's going to listen to you. So you want to totally ignore, not address and not counter, but ignore their notion of victimhood. Okay, that's the first step. So what do we do to respond? And the way to respond is simply with pride in who we are and what we've accomplished, and our contributions to the global community. Right? We don't play shamed at who we are. When they talk about Zionists as colonialists, we don't have to say, no, we're not colonialists. We say, well, no, actually, we rose up from the ashes of a Holocaust and built ourselves in a society that's democratic, that believes in freedom, that gives equal rights to all of its citizens, and we're incredibly proud of who we are. Right? I don't listen to that person calling me an oppressor. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, and I should be proud of what we've accomplished.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, good. So right. So that's right. That's what. I'm sorry, Yuda. Okay. So
I have a question.
Now the next step is how do we use right? We have to then go on to the next step, and the next step is using shared values and interests. Okay, So we want to do is we want to use our shared values with the people that we're talking about and our shared interests. Okay. Here's the greatest thing. It's the greatest thing that we have, and the greatest mistake that the Palestinians have made and the Arab community has made. We share values with the Western community, right? With the Western world. We believe in the same things they do. We believe in freedom, and we believe in liberty, and we believe in the pursuit of happiness. These are all values that we believe in. These are things that we think strongly about, and we believe that all our people should have, and we believe in human rights, right? These are all great things, and unfortunately for them and for the rest of the world, the Arabs have not signed on to that, right? The Palestinian Authority is not the bastion of human rights for their people, right? The idea of one election once forever is a distortion of democracy. It is not the feeling of democracy. So we have the ability to reach out to those that we're talking to, and we're able to say, hey, look, right? They're not letting us live on our land. We want to live on our land, and we want them to live on our land. Everybody here. This is what we believe in. We believe in democracy. We believe in equal rights, and we believe in the shared interest that the two of us have. That's what we should be talking about. So here's the thing: two steps. That the first thing, right, that we should definitely never do: never defend Israel, because it doesn't require defending. And the second thing we should never do is debate. Those two things are the holes that you're going to fall into, and you'll never climb out of. That's the worst form of advocacy. You'll never win a debate. You'll never win anybody over by defending. You don't want to be on defense. You want to be on offense. So how do we do it? So I have 5 steps that I take in any discussion about Israel. Okay, 5 very simple steps. If you follow these 5 steps, first of all, you'll still feel good about yourself. Okay, that's number 1. So you're not going to lose out on the feel good. Okay, and number 2, you actually might have a chance of opening up somebody's mind, maybe not the person you're arguing with, but the people around you, to start realizing, hey, that's a new way of looking at things. So the first thing is, you don't want to be in a contentious discussion with anybody. Okay, if you're in a contentious, you've already lost, because you've lost the person on the other side, and chances are, at best, the people that are watching are simply going to sit there and say, well, they're both wrong, because they're both just out of control and angry, right? So you're not convincing anybody. So the first thing you want to do is find common ground, right? You want to sit there and say to the person, listen, yeah, you believe in human rights, right? That's why you're so passionate about this cause, because you're worried that one of the sides here doesn't have human rights, or their human rights are being violated. So I believe in that as well. I believe in opportunity. I believe in freedom for all people. That's something that we have in common. And now all of a sudden you're on the same side, right? You're on the same side, and you're having the same sort of discussion as everybody. So now you're with them. You're no longer on the other side of the aisle with them. You're in the trenches with them. And now the second thing you want to do is to make sure it sounds genuine, okay, and this doesn't sound fake, is you want to show empathy, take responsibility, but without accepting blame, okay? Right? You want to show empathy, take responsibility, but without accepting blame. 100% Palestinians could have a better life. I feel for them. And I'm going to try to help them because I have the power. But with their corrupt leadership and terrorists that are running their lives, it becomes increasingly difficult for people like you and me who share the same values of freedom to be able to help them. How can I help people in Gaza when I send over cement for a hospital and it's used for a terror tunnel? When every single time we send over billions in foreign aid, the money is used for rockets instead of helping people build up their economy and be able to find jobs and support themselves. How can I do that? This is a common thing that we have together. It doesn't help me if Palestinians have a bad life. It actually makes it harder for me. Of course I want to help them, but with their corrupt leadership, I don't know how to do so, right? So that's the That's the next step that you want to be able to take. And now you want to go in, and now you want to say, right? But like any other people, Israelis and Jews have a right to exist on their own land, right? And that's what we're so proud of, that we've enabled that to happen. So now you brought the person over. They no longer see Israel as the bad thing, right? They see Israel as, okay, I get it. It's a struggle. They have this struggle, and that's where you're gonna help them. And now, look, if Israel was given more and more opportunity, and we didn't have to worry about terrorism, the cherry tomatoes that we have and the drip irrigation, that we've all done under the threat of war and gun. Imagine if we didn't have to take a lot of our GDP and put it towards our defense. Imagine if we were able to invest that more into education and more into the sciences and more into development. Imagine how much we could accomplish. And then for the last step, we should be working together to get this stuff done. Imagine if we could create a high-tech hub in Palestine, in the West Bank. Jews and Arabs working together. And the best part is, it already exists. There are industrial areas where it already exists. But if we could grow them, if we could do more, then those oases of peace throughout the West Bank and throughout Judea and Samaria could become an example to the world of what could be accomplished here. People like you and me, who both believe in freedom, who both believe in human rights, we should be working together on that. And there you go. Now you haven't defended, you've advocated for Israel, you've shown people the right way, and you've done so through empathy, through taking responsibility, and finding shared and common interests. And that's how you advocate for Israel. And that's why the organizations that get paid the millions of dollars to do this, and smart, wealthy people are supporting them, are not supporting the Israel Debate Society, but they're supporting people who talk about cherry tomatoes all the time. Because nobody wants to hear about Israel's right to exist, and nobody wants to hear about the intricacies of international law, because it's not going to convince anybody. So now I told Will I'd do a half an hour and then do 30 minutes of or 25 minutes of Q&A. So I've kept my part of the bargain. So so if anybody has any questions, that's now's your turn. You just have to turn on your mic, and if you have any questions, you're more than able to talk.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, where does their argument even come from? You know, people that aren't even Palestinians in America, who don't have family that are living in Gaza. Where does their education even come from? Because you have people that are very smart, very intellectual people that seem to be so convinced that there's this narrative of oppression and that Israel is just evil. Like, where does this even come from? Like, when you're unraveling like a point like that, like, how do you even go about it? How does advocating matter when people often are rooted in just illogical questions?
Well, I've got 15 minutes.
Well, haters are gonna hate, no matter what, right? So you're not gonna have a conversation with Ilhan Omar and convince her that she's looking at things the wrong way, right? And there are millions of Ilhan Omars out there. She just happened to somehow get into Congress, right? So you're not gonna be able to take those people and convince them, right? Somebody that really hates, that's really convinced that Israel is wrong, that's how they're gonna look at things. There's not going to be anything that you're going to be able to do that's different, right? You're not going to be able to separate them from the hate. But for people that are somewhat critical, people that are somewhat critical and don't really understand the facts, but they're not really invested in it so much. They're just, this is their cause of the day or the cause of the year. Those are people that you could really talk to, and those are people that you want to encourage, because they're generally progressive. So they believe in helping. They believe in advancing society. They're idealistic and sometimes pragmatic. So if you get those people to work with you, then you can do it. You can really do it. So if you're asking academically, where are they coming from? Not in terms of how do we turn them around, but where are they coming from? It's very simple, right? The Palestinians have a very easy narrative. Their narrative says that, like, it's simple. This was our land, and then Europeans came in and took it from us, and now we don't have it anymore.
Is there no truth to that?
There's no truth to that because it's our land. It's true that they were there, and it's true that they got there, and it wasn't a Jewish state when they got there. They didn't get there 2,000 years ago. So we came, and it wasn't like the entire state of Israel is even a majority European, right? It's majority Sephardic from Arab lands. So the narrative that we were here, they came in and took our land is false because it's not their land, right? Just because you live somewhere doesn't make it your land. And if it did, then guess what? Now it's our land, right? There's an inherent illogical position to their argument. Because when Palestinians say that to me, I just sit there and tell them, okay, how long did it take for you to take the land? And tell me how long that is, and then we'll just wait, and I'll start the discussion at that point. So we've been here 70 years now. So you tell me you have to be here 100 years, 200 years. Okay, so we'll be here for 200 years. And then we'll talk about whose land it is now. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's not how we establish things. But that's going back to a factual debate, so it doesn't matter. So that's where
being there. So being there for 2,000 years isn't long enough? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying from their perspective. From their perspective, their argument is that since we were here for a long time, it's ours. So I'm saying, okay, fine. So how long is a long time? Give me that number. We'll wait here that long, and then we'll say, okay, now whose land is it?
But then you go back to a might makes right type of argument. All right, well then we'll use force to stay here for another 2,000 years, and that makes it okay.
Which is completely illogical. Everything's illogical. So then it goes down to international law, and guess what? There is no international law about this stuff. It doesn't exist. Everybody points to Sykes-Picot, and then no, but what about the Balfour Declaration? No, but what about the White Paper? Oh, what about the Partition Plan? Oh, and then there was Annapolis, and then there was Sharon's letter, and then it would go back and forth. The problem is there's no such thing as international consensus on international law. So everybody just points to whatever they want, and then they say, "See, now I'm right," and you get nowhere. It's a total waste of time. If you have a college paper on these issues, and you want to write a college paper, or you want to write a book that no one's going to read, so then there's plenty of material to go through. But the only people that are going to read your book are people that agree with you anyway and just want to have facts to back them up so they can get into arguments with people that aren't going to listen to them and then be able to quote from your book. Okay. I'm a very pragmatic person. So I don't, all these like abstract arguments that get you nowhere don't appeal to me.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I have two questions. First, when you have a conversation with a Jew who is anti-Israel, is that conversation any different from a non-Jew who is anti-Israel? And the second question is, if someone says, well, all this conflict will go away with the two-state solution, are you just like, no, that's not true at all? I'm personally against the two-state solution. That's why I'm saying that. Or do you say let's work together to like what if someone says all this will go away with the two-state solution? What would the response be?
So it's like this. So if to your first question, 90% of these arguments that you're going to have are with Jews, which on the one hand like frustrates a lot of people. They're like, wait a minute, are you telling me like you're on a college campus, on an advocacy level, on an organizational level, right? Most of the people that are in this battle on both sides are Jews. And it frustrates you like crazy. You're like, you're one of us. Like, what are you doing? Like, come on. And then, right? And the reason why that is because the only people that care are us, right? So, right? We imagine that like the world cares. You can go throughout all of Iowa during the primary season, and you'll never hear Israel mentioned, except from Jews from out of state that come into Iowa that bring it up, right? That's if not now, people come in. None of them are from Iowa. They're all from like, expensive private colleges that they come in and they're paid to come in and ask the questions. So nobody cares about this except for Jews. And Jews are either going to find themselves like, establishment Jews and they're going to be on our side, or they're anti-establishment and therefore they have to go against what their parents and grandparents thought, and therefore they find themselves on the other aisle. Most of this stuff is psychological, not anything dealing with the actual issues. So most of these conversations are with Jews, so that's what it goes to. It's just that those Jews that you're having the argument with have replaced their Jewish values with more universal ones. So you have to show how your Jewish values appeal to universal values, and then you can find that common ground, right? That's the first step. And then in terms of your second question, it's very hard for me to believe that you don't believe in the two-state solution. I'm a settler and I believe in the two-state solution, right? You're telling me that right now, if you knew with 100% certainty, to the point of prophecy, that if you left Judea and Samaria and established a Palestinian state, not one more Jew would die from terrorism. You're telling me you would want to keep Judea and Samaria?
If I had that prophecy power and I saw it would work, maybe I would probably be in favor of it.
Right. Okay. So you're an advocate of the two-state solution. You just don't think it's practical. Right. Okay. Great. That's where the rest of the world is also. That's where everybody is. Everybody's in the same position. We just don't like to talk about it. Right. Everybody's an advocate. You'd be the crazy, most extremist person to think, no, I want terrorism to continue, and I like to pay shiva costs to Jewish families and explain to mothers why their children have to die so that we can keep a strip of land. That's insane. Right? No one thinks that way. That's the craziest thing in the world, that the strip of land is more important than peace. No, that's nuts. It's as crazy as saying that if we just get a little stronger and establish ourselves a little more in Judea and Samaria, the Arabs will stop having terrorism and we'll be able to stop them if we're just instill more draconian measures. All this, it's just as crazy, both sides. So we're all advocates of a two-state solution, but nobody in the world thinks it can happen now. Right? That's the fact, right? So even Donald Trump is in favor of the two-state solution, right? So, like, everybody's in favor of the two-state solution. Just nobody thinks it's practical, right? So when somebody says to me, right, you're against the two-state solution, right? So I'm like, no, I'm for the two-state solution. I'm just against it today. Yeah, I don't think it's possible today. And do you think it's possible today? No. And somebody says, well, we have to keep talking about it. So that's my big argument. That the more you talk about the two-state solution, the more you avoid more practical solutions to the problem that could actually create peace today. So that's my problem. That's what I talk to members of Congress about when they talk about the insistence of talking about a two-state solution. So I say to them, just keep in mind, every time you talk about the two-state solution and try to advance a two-state solution, that everybody in the most optimistic way doesn't think it happened for the next 2 or 3 decades. So then real solutions and real practical things that could stop violence from happening and stop people from dying, we're avoiding those conversations. So talking about the two-state solution is actually causing more violence to happen, and that's what we should be avoiding. So you're not against the two-state solution, you're for the two-state solution, you just don't think it's practical, and let's investigate other avenues where we could actually solve things and make things better for people.
I heard that one of the best, this is just in general with debating, your best argument is, or the best way to debate is be on the offense. Never be, if you're on the defense, you're losing. If you're on the offense, you're winning. So if you're talking to someone and you try to play, you can play the empathetic middle ground role, or like not middle ground, empathetic tactics and say, I sympathize, but you're controlled by terrorists, and I don't want to work with terrorists. Or you can be like, if they're going after Israel, you can just say, well, you have is it better to be aggressive in these conversations? Is what I'm trying to say.
Well, it's never good to be aggressive, because being aggressive is a turnoff to people. But it is good to talk about, I would say, accentuate the positives and talk about the great things about Israel and talk about how you want those great things to be shared with the Palestinian people as well. Right? We want to share our wealth and share our riches with everybody. Right? That's what we want to do. And the question just is how to effectively do that. Right? The effective way of doing that is not by telling Jews to leave their land. That's not going to do it. Right? The effective way of doing that is being peace to the land. Right? So the first thing we have to do is get rid of the terrorists. Right? We got to make sure terrorists are not controlling things. Right now we have terrorists that control things. Right? So we've got to stop doing that. We have to stop enabling terrorism. Once we can stop enabling terrorism, then we can start talking about bringing those positives to the Palestinian people. Right now, I can't, as a settler, I can't even go into a Palestinian town. There's a big red sign in front of all Palestinian towns that says it's too dangerous for me. That's an issue. Right? That should be the first thing that people should sit there and say, I can't even help Palestinian people. Right? Because I can't get to them.
Yes. I have a question, Rabbi. You said you do kind of these talks on college campuses in America or just in Israel? And if so, which colleges do you find yourself going to? And like, have you ever been faced with, challenges of like rowdy crowds that see like pro-Israel speaker and, like anything like that? Like just any experiences that are.
I do go to college campuses. I try to only do 1 or 2 a year at most. I don't like to do more than that because I find like one-off sort of like lectures not to be the most effective way of most effective use of my time. But they're necessary because if you don't do them like this one, but like no, but I find that it's not the most effective use of your time just to stand up and talk for 45 minutes and walk away and nobody ever hears from you again. That I find is not effective. It opens up a door, but a lot of times people just don't follow up, so it's not so effective. But I like to do my part, and I like to do 1 or 2. I'm not that when I speak, I'm not the type of person. You can hear how I talk, so I don't like stake a claim in the ground and then say, like, okay, you're either with me or you're not with me. I reach out. So generally when I speak to crowds, I don't give the other side the ammunition to be able to sit there and say, oh, you're a horrible person. Oh, so it's very hard in the middle of my talks to stand up and be like, I don't believe in Palestinian rights like you do. Like, wait, what? Hold on a second. The guy just said he believes in equal rights to Palestinians. He's a settler. So the most they're going to scream out is you're a liar. And then I'll be like, well, how do you know? Like that doesn't make any sense. So I don't really give people the opportunity to shout me down. I've gone to Berkeley. I've gone to different places and spoken, and it's gone relatively well. Berkeley, I got like accosted on the street and stuff. That was weird, but not during my talk at all. And that's online. You can find that on my YouTube channel. You can watch the whole Berkeley speech, but there's no fireworks. There's nothing that happens, again, because my speaking style is not something that lends itself to that. I don't believe in that. So I don't really ever have problems with crowds for that reason.
So to follow up, your day-to-day, like say, like I guess without this virus going on, what is it like? Are you more on my platform? Are you making like programs?
What do I do day to day? I'm an educator, so I teach in high schools in America, and through NCSY. And I have I run into college students, I speak to college students, but I'm not like the Israel advocacy guy. I'm not like a stand with us type of guy, And I do on my own. I do a lot of lobbying with members of Congress, and with the American government and the White House and different places, more as a way of, hey, look, I'm a resource that you could have. This morning I had a 45-minute Zoom meeting with somebody who's like 10 minutes away from me, but we can't obviously get together. Who's somebody that works for the American government and reports back to the American government what goes on in Judea and Samaria. So in that sense, I'm giving a positive image about Israel, what goes on here, what's great, and again, not advocating, just like that way when members of Congress read reports about what goes on here, they're reading positive things. So in that sense, I try to make myself an asset to decision makers so that I can use the trust that I build with them to give a positive impression of Israel.
Thank you.
Well, can you just ask him to go through his 5 steps again?
He's recording it, so you can watch it.
Or like the last 3 were not.
They weren't very distinct.
No, they were.
Okay, fine. What were the last 3 steps of your 5-step process in like sort of distinctual?
Okay, so the was advocate for Israel's rights, right? Now that you see what we're all about, so you obviously want us to exist, right? That's number 1. Number 2 is show Israel's great side, right? The high tech aspect, the what we bring to the world and how we benefit the world, and reaching out and having people work together. We should be working together. We shouldn't be on opposite sides because we believe in the same things.
And you're willing to call them Palestinian people, and you're willing to call the West Bank Palestine if you think it'll make you and the person you're talking to come together, or no?
Who cares?
Right.
It's like people feel like, oh my God, if you say West Bank, people forget that it's Yehuda v'Shomron. Come on, like, give me a break. Like, really? Like, that's like, I don't want to put Frank Luntz out of business, but like, the reason why people are pro-Palestinian is not because we accidentally started calling them Palestinians. And if we stop calling them Palestinians, people aren't going to be like, we should stop listening to them. They're not even real. You know, like it's just it's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. This stuff is ridiculous. You know, again, it's idealistic, not pragmatic. You're talking about a world today where, and I pardon me for saying this, I don't know what everybody's political correctness is, but where somebody who's a biological man can get up and say that he's a woman, and the world sits there and says, if you don't agree with that person, so you could be like penalized by law. And now you're going to turn to like 8 million people in the world and be like, no, you're not really Palestinian. And you think you're going to get somewhere with that? Like, that's crazy. Like, that's the craziest thing in the world, to think that you're going to be successful in this like PR campaign of refusing to call people by what they think they are, when we're ignoring simple biological facts around the world today.
So do you have a question about Haredi?
Oh, yeah. So my question is, how do you juggle being, Haredi in that viewpoint, along with like your view of Zionism?
How have you juggling being Haredi?
I know I tend to be like, I'm a recovering, secular Zionist here. So I know the Haredi community tends to have a different viewpoint on like what is the state of Israel. So like, how does that?
So first of all, I in my heart I think I'm Haredi, but nobody agrees with me. I live in like a settlement that's like the more Chardal type of thing. But I really appreciate. I consider that a compliment. I'm hoping it's not, you're judging that by my character, not by my white shirt. But I definitely. So I tell you, I struggled greatly. I never associated myself until about a year ago as a Zionist. I always looked at the state of Israel more pragmatically, and look, there's Jewish people live here. They need to live here successfully, and that's where they are, and we should help them. And the state of Israel has promoted more Torah learning than anything else, so it's doing more good than it's bad. But I never called myself a Zionist until one of my students bought me a book by somebody named Gil Troy, which is like a redo. And the book, I forgot it's called. I have it over there. I don't remember what it's called exactly. His name is Gil Troy. It's a book on Zionism. It's like, and what it does is it goes through about 60 or 70 different Zionist thinkers of the last 150 years, and gives like a 2 to 3 page synopsis of their philosophy. And I actually found 2 rabbis in what's it called in. I found 2 rabbis in that book who were pre-Zionism, like they were part of the Zionist movement, but before the state of Israel, who I subscribed to everything they said. And I said, I finally found my place in Zionism. So now I say I'm a Zionist. Now nobody else in Zionism believed like these 2 rabbis did, and like no one knows who they are, but they consider themselves Zionist, and I consider myself associated with their philosophy. So therefore I'm a Zionist now. So that's how, but it was very much a pragmatic point, which is how I think most Haredim view the state of Israel, and I didn't believe in the philosophy of a secular state at all. But now I really believe I found my place.
Thank you.
But definitely suggest you read that book if you're struggling. If you struggle like me for years and trying to find your place in Zionism, I definitely suggest you read that book.
Is it called The Ideas of Zionism? It's like a blue book.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly. You can't miss it. I mean, it's called like Zionism or something.
If the Torah says that anti-Semitism is the cause because people aren't keeping the Torah, then what do you think about all these personalities that are now in this Zionist world that aren't religious Jews? They're just advocating for Israel, but essentially by not keeping the Torah, are they really solving the issue, or are they just doing debating that doesn't really do much? Because I know there's a lot of online personalities that have come up nowadays that are fighting the great fight, but essentially they're not doing what the Torah even says stops anti-Semitism.
Right, it's a recipe for disaster. Right, all this stuff is we're not winning any battles. That's the thing. It's not going to happen. Right, it's not going to happen. We're not winning debates. So the best that we can do is pull people to our side. That's what we want to do. We want to pull people to our side. We don't want to win debates. Right, so anybody that's on social media that's like, oh, Israel's right. What are you doing? I don't understand. Most of these people are self-serving anyway. I'm sorry, but they are, But what's the point, right? What's the point of what you're trying to accomplish? So what you should be doing is you should be reaching out and definitely following the Torah. That's your guys' responsibility. You're at Aish HaTorah, right? So that's you got to get all those people, right? I don't go to Aish HaTorah, so I don't have to worry about Kiruv, right? That's what the whole Noach's whole biography is all about. It's our position, not yours, right? To distort a book, right? So that's the idea. But no, in serious, obviously you have to follow Torah. But with that, I do have to get going. I give a shiur now in Atlanta, Georgia. So I thank you very much. Well, thank you for putting this together. I very much enjoyed it. And
Thank you so much. Hopefully after this virus, we can come over for a Shabbaton at your place. That would be amazing.
as soon as this stuff is gone, I mean, for sure, you're all invited. Have a stay healthy and stay safe, everybody, and keep learning Torah. Have some time.
Thank you. Thank you. See you.
Will.